Welcome to Taking Up Space, the podcast with conversations exploring what it means to inhabit our bodies fully without shame or apology and reconnect with our innate wisdom to find healing and body liberation. I'm your host, Cassie, a licensed clinical social worker, certified sex therapist, and certified body trust practitioner. For over 10 years, I've worked with women and marginalized folks to reclaim their bodies, their inner knowing, and their lives in a world that often seeks to diminish their voices and experiences. In this podcast, we'll unpack the societal norms and expectations that interrupt our embodiment, like trauma, oppression, illness and pain, and the social constructs of gender, race, sexuality, beauty, health, and weight. My hope is that through this podcast, we'll learn to drop into our bodies and give ourselves permission to occupy space, physically, emotionally, relationally, and intellectually, with more confidence and authenticity. Join us as we challenge societal norms, explore what it means to find wholeness and reclaim our right to take up space as an act of resistance and body liberation. While this podcast might feel therapeutic, it is not psychotherapy and doesn't constitute a therapist-client relationship. This is a good time to mention, too, that this podcast will at times use adult language, so listener discretion is advised. If you are interested in diving in deeper, make sure you check out my online shop where I'm currently offering my Taking Up Space workbook for free. This workbook includes thought-provoking exercises, reflective journal prompts, and actionable strategies that can help guide you towards a deeper understanding of yourself and your needs and cultivate a more profound sense of embodiment and your own liberation. You can find this workbook and other resources at my website. That's inneratlastherapy.com/shop. Welcome to another episode of Taking Up Space. Today, we're talking to Nicola Salmon, a pioneering fat-positive fertility coach and author from the UK. Nicola's specialization is both unique and profoundly needed. Nicola offers a revolutionary approach to fertility and pregnancy support, especially for those navigating these experiences in larger bodies. She's also written a book on this topic called Fat and Fertile: How to Get Pregnant in a Bigger Body. Today, we're diving into her work and unpacking the medicalized fat phobia and its impact on fertility and pregnancy care within the medical system. It's through Nicola's own fertility journey and process of becoming a parent that led her to doing this work. So she brings in personal insights and expertise that challenge this fat-phobic medical paradigm. Medicalized fat phobia, or weight bias in healthcare settings, significantly affects the quality of care and outcomes for folks, especially those in larger bodies. In fertility care, this anti-fat bias often manifests through restricted access to treatments like in vitro fertilization or IVF. Many are denied these treatments or told to go lose a significant amount of weight first, regardless of their overall health status. Infertility as a whole is frequently blamed solely on someone's weight, overshadowing other potential causes towards infertility. And that leads to repetitive, unsolicited advice for patients to lose weight rather than providing comprehensive, individualized care. During pregnancy, this bias translates into an overemphasis on potential risks. So that causes a lot of undue fear and stress, despite a lack of evidence and research that shows the impact of being in a larger body, what that might have on some conditions. Pregnant individuals with higher body weights often face discriminatory practices, whether it's derogatory comments to less respectful treatment, inadequate treatment. And this stigma discourages many people from seeking necessary prenatal care and results in worsening health outcomes overall. Additionally, higher rates of C-sections are often recommended or performed for folks in larger bodies without a clear medical necessity, driven by misconceptions about the safety of vaginal births for those in bigger bodies. So in today's episode, Nicola is going to share a little bit of her story and the transformative moments that led her into this field of fertility coaching, as well as unpacking all of those misconceptions around fat bodies in relation to fertility and pregnancy care. And she emphasizes the importance of compassionate healthcare and advocacy for self-empowerment within the medical system. Throughout our conversation, Nicola is going to highlight her fat positive fertility framework, and that all works together to help people achieve their fertility goals. This episode provides you some really practical support for an often stigmatized aspect of healthcare. Nicola is such a wonderful human to share space with. She has great expertise, and I know you'll learn so much, regardless of whether you're trying to become a parent or are already a parent or have no interest in being a parent. This is a really great episode. So thanks for listening, and here's my conversation with Nicola Salmon.
Hey there, Nicola. Welcome to Taking Up Space. I'm so glad you're here with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Cassie. I'm so excited that we get to meet and we get to chat.
I know we were just chatting a little bit before we hit record around some of our own journeys, but I'm wondering if for people who don't know you yet and they're listening to this conversation, could you introduce who you are, where you are, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Nicola Salmon. I would describe myself as a fat positive fertility coach, which means that I specifically support fat folks who want to get pregnant and through whatever that experience holds for them. You might be able to tell I'm in the UK. So I live on the border between England and Wales in a wonderful little forest with my husband, my 2 boys, and my dog Huckleberry, who is just lying on my feet now, so keeping me warm.
What an amazing specialization to arrive into. And we were talking a little bit before we hit record, but maybe we can go back to how your own body story and your own experience impacts how you arrived at this specialization. I'm guessing you don't just fall into a fat positive fertility coach.
It wasn't something a guidance counselor told me would be my job trajectory for sure. It's something I totally made up. But yeah, so when I was 16, I was diagnosed with a condition called PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And when I got that diagnosis at 16, the doctor said, you won't be able to have kids. You need to lose weight. That's going to, quote unquote, cure you, which, spoiler alert, it didn't.
Right.
So I was given the oral contraceptive pill, told that would regulate my cycles, and then sent on my merry way. So I expected it was going to be really hard for me to get pregnant all through my teens and my 20s. And that definitely impacted my relationship with my body, my self-esteem, my identity, like who I thought I was, how I thought I was worthy of love, like so many, like my relationships on a really deep level, it impacted a lot of who I grew up to be. But fast forwarding from that, and I ended up going into a healing job. So I trained as an acupuncturist and ended up in fertility. I think partly because of my own issues and interest in hormones, and because acupuncture is quite popular for fertility, especially in the UK. We have a lot of folks who come and seek it out. So it was a meeting of two things, like my interest, what people wanted to come and see me for. And that led to doing all kinds of extra trainings in fertility. So I trained as a fertility coach, which is how I ended up starting my coaching practice and doing online business, which is, again, a whole fun thing to...
That's a lot.
Very steep learning curve. And it wasn't until I was in my mid to late 20s, I'd met my husband, we decided that we wanted to start trying for kids, and I got pregnant really easily. And it was something that I was so anxious about. I was so stressed that everything was going to go wrong. Like I thought at every single point in the pregnancy that, this is going to go wrong and this is going to go wrong. I'm going to get gestational diabetes, and nothing happened. And it was just the most boring and textbook pregnancy. And at the end of that pregnancy, I decided I wanted to have a home birth. I wanted to have a water birth. And I was denied that care because of my BMI. It was the very first opportunity that I'd ever taken of actually researching what my options were and going in and advocating for something different.
Wow, good for you. Like you saw that as an opportunity. That's amazing.
It was scary, so scary. And it shocks me now that at 29, that was the first time I ever realized that I could even do that. I had the option to, in charge and consent to things. Like I had no concept of these ideas and didn't understand that I could say no, that I could ask for different things. So it was amazing and really liberating to have that conversation with my midwife and to advocate for my care. but also so sad that it took something like that to get me to a point where I could understand that I should have had that right all along. And it was, it was equal parts like amazing and equal parts frustrating.
Yeah, grief. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had my son, I went fine. And it was when he was around 6 months that I had decided that I was so exhausted being a new parent. I did not have any kind of capacity left over for thinking about dieting, for thinking about weight loss, for getting on the scales, for having conversations around that. And also, I was so acutely aware of everything that I would say about my body and about my relationship with food and him absorbing that. So it was like, at that point, I was like, you know what? This is it. I'm done with this. I do not want him to have this relationship with his body, with food, around good foods and bad foods, and hating his body and hearing me talk about my body like that. So I was just like, that's it, done. No way am I going to be doing this anymore. And it was just really fortuitous at the time that I was able to find a community of other fat people who were fat positive, were in the body liberation space, and were really just being themselves and living wonderful,
thriving
lives on the internet. And I was like, what? I can be fat and happy? Like, it blew my mind. And so then I ended up going down that rabbit hole of learning about it, reading about it, getting very angry about it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, I can't practice the way I've been practicing. Like, I cannot show up in this way. I've harmed so many people by recommending dieting and restriction that was just not serving them. So I knew that I had to do something different, and I tried to find resources and things that were available, but there just wasn't much out there. So that's how I ended up deciding that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life.
You made it up. You created it, Nicola.
Yeah, it just happened, and it's been happening ever since. And it's taken so many twists and turns, and, you know, like highs and lows of running your own business and trying to do something so different, but it's been so worthwhile, and I wouldn't be doing anything else.
It's such an incredible story. I love hearing about these moments for people where, like, people are carving their own path in fat liberation work, because there's not a lot of other, in like certain niches, like what you're talking about. And I think it's just so empowering and powerful how people like yourself blaze forward. It's just so, it's like a conviction, and but the visibility matters, as you were just talking about, like seeing you, like when I found you online, it was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I never even considered that this was an option, right? So that visibility that you create. And I know it's, like you said, I'm sure there's a lot of hard lessons along the way when there's no other template and you're figuring it out. But I'm really grateful for you and taking those risks and developing all of these pieces. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely feels always one step forward, two step backs, right? You feel like you're making progress.
Yeah.
And then you get hit by like a troll, or the next terrible news article comes out, or celebrity talks about their next, and you're just like, oh, we're just taking it. But then you've got to just, it's about regrouping, moving forward and trying again, right?
Yeah.
We need people like us to be carrying on and having these conversations and making sure that people know that there's options and there's choices, and they don't just have to do the next diet loss thing.
I'm curious if we could talk a little bit more about what fat positive fertility coaching actually entails. What are some of the things that you support people with, or what does that support look like? How do you create goals with people? I'm curious how you navigate those pieces.
It's been a lot of trial and error in finding out what people really need in terms of being in a bigger body, looking at getting support through this. And I've worked with hundreds of people now through this. And I think I've narrowed it down to 4 key elements that we work on. And I call it my fat positive fertility framework. So the F is for like the foundation. So we look at things like safety. We look at how our nervous systems are impacting us. We look at health and so rather than setting goals, what I'd try and support folks in doing is really looking what health means to them and what would actually make a difference for their life. Because we're all different. We all have different health. We all have different baselines of what our health looks like now and what we want to achieve. So we look at that and then we break it down into super small steps. So we look at, when I say a super small step, it's something that's 15 minutes or less and doesn't feel scary. I want people to be able to make really small, sustainable changes if they choose to. And again, health is never an obligation that you should have to follow.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no requirement to do that, to be able to access support and health and safety and fertility help. But if people want to, and they often do, because that's what we're trained to do, right? We're conditioned to believe that we're supposed to get quote unquote healthy and supposed to make these choices. So it's really, again, helping people separate thinness and health and what that means. And then we look at a lot around advocacy. So that's the A in the fat positive, which is really a toolbox that we never get taught at school. And especially as folks who are assigned female at birth, who lived in marginalized communities, people don't want us to know how to advocate for ourselves because we are not we're not the cis white men of the world who want to hold all the power. So really learning those skills can be really helpful, and it should not be work that we have to do, but often it is work that we need to do under the current
Necessary.
that we live in, which is sad. And of course, I want to burn the system down and start again, but it's working with what we've got to get the best possible outcome. So a lot of advocacy skills. And then we look at self-compassion and trust. So the T is trust, in looking at how we can really rebuild a trust that we may have lost in our bodies over the way, because we're taught not to trust our bodies, to not trust our hunger cues or like our thoughts and our signs and symptoms that are going on and our menstrual cycles. So it's really rebuilding that trust and your relationship with your body. And then the final piece is around like building like positive beliefs. So really examining the beliefs that you hold about being in a fat body, about your capacity to get pregnant, and really looking at if they serve you, and if not, what you could look at how to support and replace those with beliefs that your body is absolutely capable of this and you are absolutely deserving of accessing all the support, all of the tools that you might need to get there.
Beautiful framework. I like the structure of that. And as you were just saying that last point, it made me think about the thoughts that we have, and also probably the myth busting that you have to do and often do in your coaching work. What are some of the myths that you find yourself commonly unpacking or deconstructing with people as it relates to being in a fat body and pregnancy or fertility?
There are so many. It is just like it's rife with myths, because it's based on this foundational assumption that fat is bad and fat is unhealthy, and it's just not true. So I think the biggest one is that fat people can't get pregnant. Total rubbish. Fat people have been getting pregnant for millennia and will continue to do so.
Yeah.
If fatness was the problem, then all fat people would not be able to get pregnant, but that is just not the case. So that is the biggest one that is kind of become. And the one kind of leading on from that is that fat people shouldn't get pregnant. And this is the one that I know a lot of people really struggle with. And they've been told by their healthcare providers that it would be unethical for them to treat them or help them, or
oh my God.
Yeah, or that it's their fault in some way, that they're to blame if something goes wrong. And it's just, there's so much blame and shame put at fat folks' door when it comes to fertility and pregnancy. And I think that is just, it makes me so angry that is the case. And it is so far from true. Like anybody of any sized body deserves and has the right to grow their family in whatever way that they choose. That is like a fundamental human right, and it makes me so angry that is taken away and denied to so many people.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about all of the power hierarchies that exist in healthcare and how if you already have a disembodied relationship with your body, like you feel like your body is not good, or you feel like your body is bad or unhealthy, and then you're hearing from your healthcare provider like more of the same, like all that medicalized fat phobia, just how that power dynamic makes you feel like, oh, maybe this is true. Like you really buy into it. And it just really breaks my heart how there's not an alternative narrative for a lot of people. This is just what they feel like is the reality, right?
They're conditioned to believe that. And of course, like so many folks don't know, never thought to question their healthcare providers, right? We're told that
Exactly.
know best, that can't go and look at Dr. Google, like everything like that would empower us to make our own decisions and research. We're told that that's not appropriate for us. And it's really just a disempowering healthcare system that we have now that takes away a lot of the autonomy that we should hold ourselves. Like, even the decisions around fertility tests and fertility treatments, doctors withhold that. It's not a conversation about this is the risk, this is the benefit, this is just a blanket no based on your BMI, which is abhorrent and just so unethical.
Yeah, I agree completely. I know when I was going through my pregnancy and I was already in a fat body, and one of my big concerns at the time, or at least a lot of like the story around it at the time, was just, oh my gosh, I don't want to gain too much weight. Like I'm going to get in trouble with my doctor. And they give you that range of what's acceptable weight to gain or whatever. I'm guessing that comes up in your coaching. How do you work with folks around their fears around gaining weight in pregnancy?
Yeah, it's so common because we're so taught you mustn't gain weight, you mustn't gain weight. Gaining weight is bad. And I think it's really helpful to just help people understand why these things exist. So why these pressures are there, where they come from, the assumptions that doctors are making about fat bodies, why these are really not true, giving people this kind of alternative framework to look at and really understand why we're in the world that we're in. And then what I try and help folks do is to really put that shame back where it belongs. It doesn't belong with us. It's not our fault. We do not deserve this blame. It belongs to the systems that exist. It belongs to the training that the doctors got. It belongs to the healthcare professionals that aren't training themselves in anti-fat bias and looking at the bigger picture when it comes to health and well-being. So really helping them redirect some of those emotions and those feelings around where their body is, so they have different thoughts that they can offer themselves when those thoughts come up. And they always will. Like, we're going against 30, 40 years of conditioning at this point of the opposite. So it's, giving people realistic choices as to what to expect, but also giving them a different way of thinking about it and a different reality as to what that could look like. And then finally, helping them just come to a place of neutrality with their body rather than the story that we need to be positive and we need to love our bodies. It can be totally fine just to appreciate your body for growing your baby and just understand how incredible that is, and just really thank it for doing what it's doing right now, and just being okay with bodies know what it's doing. It's growing a whole human being, which is phenomenal. And if it needs to gain whatever weight it needs to gain, like that is okay. These weight limits are totally arbitrary that they put in. They're totally fat phobic because they're not the same for everybody. Every pregnant person is growing an extra organ and increasing their fluid content and growing a human being. Like, how is that going to vary on body size? It's wild to me.
Yes. You also bring up a point that resonates with my own experience and my own kind of body neutrality and acceptance and respect and kindness, is that when I was pregnant, it like really allowed me to appreciate the wisdom of my body in a different way. I'm literally just like living my life and my body is taking care of all of the rest. Is so phenomenal. And I know that's not an access point for everybody, nor does it have to be. But I know for me, like to be able, it took me a while to become pregnant. And there was a little bit of betrayal that I felt at the time. And once I was pregnant and then my body was able to deliver this baby in the way that it did, it was just like this incredible reconnection with my body, even if the size was what it was. And I wonder if that's some of the work that you see here too, like maybe an awakening for people to reacquaint themselves with just like the amazing wisdom that their body has to do this task, to create life.
Yeah, without consciousness. We're not thinking, oh, I've got to grow an eyeball now. Like it's just doing it on its own. And I think as well. Some people's experiences of pregnancy can really, you just become so much more aware of what's going on in your body. So like different aches and pains that you might experience, and people's like food cravings, like that can be something that can be really another beautiful point to be able to
interesting. I didn't see that.
Yeah. And all of a sudden those cravings are okay. We almost give ourselves permission to be like, it's okay to have cravings in pregnancy. You know, it's what baby wants, and it almost can allow us to let ourselves acknowledge those cravings and also allow ourselves to honor them too.
Oh, that's such an interesting point that I didn't think about.
Pregnancy is just this magical thing, and there's so many things I think that that can give us an opportunity for it. And it's okay if you're not in a space to do that, and it's okay if it's a hard pregnancy, because not everybody has easy pregnancies. Like that is just not the reality. Like it is such a vulnerable time in our lives. But yeah, there are wonderful opportunities to appreciate what our bodies are going through and the work that they're putting into growing another human being, which is just such an awe-inspiring thing.
Really is. And I'm reflecting on how like our relationship with appetite and desire shifts when we're in a pregnant body, and how there's like more permission for some, right? Like it's not, right? Not everyone has this experience, but maybe it feels like, like it's not my appetite, it's like the baby's appetite, or it's like for baby, not for me. Which I think is just an interesting thing to reflect on, like someone's relationship with food overall and how it shifts as they're going through a pregnancy.
Yeah, I think it is sometimes for some a portal for, okay, like it's all right for me to eat the foods that I want to eat, and it's all right for me to feed myself and nourish myself, because I definitely think there is a shift from, to nourishment more than just like a diet. Like it becomes more of a loving process to our bodies to feed them rather than just a functional process.
Yeah, that's really cool to think about. I know when I was going through my pregnancy and talked with a number of my friends over the years who have gone through pregnancy, there's a lot of fear around like the health conditions that people can develop in their pregnancy. And I know some of the fat phobia in healthcare is those conditions are because someone's in a larger body or because of their size or shape. So like gestational diabetes was one, for example. I was terrified of getting gestational diabetes or preeclampsia or whatever else. I'm curious if you could share some more of the science behind that. And I'm guessing there's a lot of like mythology based up in like those health conditions and who's at risk to get them and why, versus what anti-fat bias playing out in healthcare is telling us.
Yeah, and then if you were to believe your doctor, it would be like everybody in a fat body gets gestational diabetes, nobody in a thin body gets it. But that's not the reality at all. Like all bodies can experience gestational diabetes. That's just a fact. We tend to think now that a lot of it is genetic, so it's not something you've done, it's not something you've eaten, it's not anything that you could have controlled. It's just something that maybe is just genetically going to happen. For folks who have like type 2 diabetes in their health history of like family history, then it's something that's likely to show up. But when it comes to the science, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Like it's kind of, because research is often funded by weight loss providers or people who
it's biased too. That's a great point.
It's made by people who believe that fat is bad. So unpicking a lot of the research, what I found is that it's not black and white. There is not all of the research that shows as your BMI increases, so does your risk of these conditions. That's just not the reality. I'd say it's probably like a third that show that, a third that shows absolutely no correlation at all, and then a third that shows that there is possibly a correlation, but it's not statistically significant. So you can't say that it happens. And also we don't have a biological mechanism that explains it. So it's a correlation, which means as one goes up, the other goes up. We don't know what's causing it. We don't know what's happening. But the research that does show that there is this correlation, that maybe as your BMI increases, so does the chance of it happening. It never takes into account the lived experience of fat people. So it will never look at Are they on a diet? Have they dieted through their pregnancy? Because we know that restriction can impact the health of somebody through pregnancy.
Yeah.
Never looked at the history of dieting. So weight cycling, has your weight gone up and down over time, which we know again can impact your health. It doesn't look at the weight stigma that you might have experienced as a fat person. So how you were treated by healthcare providers. Has your pregnancy been full of stress because of microaggressions of weight stigma throughout that pregnancy? And we know that when you experience all this shame and blame through pregnancy, it increases your cortisol, it increases your adrenaline, that impacts your inflammation level, it impacts your immune system. There's so many ways that it can impact your physical health, and none of that's taken into consideration. So we don't know if that link is there. If it's there, we don't know why it's there. And the thing that's going to fix it is not going to be weight loss. It's going to be compassionate healthcare. It's going to be treating people as human beings with kindness, with giving them the support they need, because gestational diabetes is a thing that we can help people with. We don't.
It's treatable.
And it's totally controllable through pregnancy. But if we shame people and judge people, then they're so much less likely to want to access help and support. And they're so much more likely to feel awful through their pregnancy with it and feel like it's their fault and their responsibility. It's definitely something that we can do so much better with in terms of supporting our pregnant folks through it.
Yeah. And I'm thinking the same would be for people who are trying to conceive, right? Like the impact that stress and weight stigma and anti-fat bias that plays out, how that also could be an influencing factor here as far as like someone's ability to get pregnant. Like you tell me, but I feel like there's research somewhere that says the more stressed you are when trying to conceive, that can impact your ability to conceive. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not a case of, there's this old adage in the fertility world of, oh, just relax and everything will be okay. That's not helpful information at all. The first thing that I do with folks when I work with them is we try and find a way of feeling safer. So we try and look at how can we build some safety into our environments. And often being in a community with other fat folks can be really helpful, like shared experiences, because fertility can be so isolating. But fertility as a fat person is even more isolating because you don't want to share that with your friends and family. You might not even want to share it with your doctor because of the fear of the judgment and the shame that you may or may not experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear the unique needs that bigger body folks have in fertility support, pregnancy support. Do you do work with folks also post-baby? Do you continue to work with clients beyond that point and support them? Or
sometimes if they need it, it really depends on people's needs. And I can only offer that from like a lived experience, peer support, rather than it's not something I have a lot of trained expertise in. But as a fat person who's been through that and navigated that, I often will talk to people who I've worked with about like breastfeeding. Again, it can be really traumatic as a fat person because so many people will never take into the consideration of what your body looks like and how that might affect feeding. But also, again, there is a lot around your changing body and how that feels once you've given birth and how you experience like the postnatal care system. So there's a lot of benefits to seeking support and help if you need it through that process. So it can be a really, again, an isolating and challenging time.
Absolutely. One of the components that you mentioned in your framework was advocacy. And I'm wondering if we could take some time unpacking what that could look like or sound like. What does it look like to advocate for yourself with your doctor or with other healthcare providers that you might be interfacing with throughout your fertility process or throughout pregnancy?
Yeah, so I have a little phrase that I use for my advocacy, and it's prepare and care. So we do a lot of preparation beforehand, and that is looking at making sure that you know what you want to get out of your appointment. So really digging deep into what you want to get out of it, what your expectations are, what your boundaries are that you might want to put in with a healthcare provider. If you don't want to be weighed, if you don't want to think about diets, looking at how we can put those in place, different strategies for that. I also walk people through research. So if they want to access, for example, a particular treatment or a particular test, we'll go through what some of the research says so that they have that in their back pocket if they need it. And as part of that preparation, we also do things around nervous system support. So really walking through what to expect, like your nervous system is probably going to be on high alert through that. How can we support it beforehand? How we can support it during? And then the care bit is like how we can support it after. So making sure once you come out of that appointment that you are treating yourself with as much kindness as possible, because it is a really hard experience to go.
So activating. Yeah.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that you might cry, or you might lose, or you might struggle through that, or the doctor might still say no, and none of that is your fault. Like, all of it is totally normal. I'll often write scripts for people if they find that useful, so that they have things that they can read out. So even if they feel that they can't think and they don't know what we talked about and they don't know what we said, they've got words in front of them that they can read out, or they write it down themselves ahead of time so that they know. And this is all skills. These are all things that we get better at the more we practice. So it's just about doing your best in that moment, trying your best to get what you want out of that appointment, and then making sure that you have a big dose of self-compassion afterwards. So watching your favorite sitcom, getting your favorite snack, making sure you've got your support system around you of people that are going to help you process that and navigate that. And then we look at next steps together of the outcomes, and really just making sure they feel cared for, held, supported through that process.
I love the empowerment and the self-compassion piece. It's just a tender time, no matter how you look at it. It's
one
just
of the most tender, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have written a book, and what an accomplishment. Share a little bit more. So the name of the book is Fat and Fertile?
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit more about like your process of writing that book, and also other things that people might expect if they were to pick it up. What else is in there?
So I wrote it quite early on my kind of own journey into this work. I think it's so relatable because it is you can almost, when I go back to it now and look at it, I can see my own journey through this work in the book. And I self-published it myself. I wrote it, edited it. So it is a really raw and really deeply personal journey through a lot of like my experiences, but also a lot of the coaching tools that I use with clients I've included to help people walk through as I'm walking through with it. Yeah. And it has a bit of research in there, a lot of research into the ethics of getting pregnant in a bigger body. And whilst I would absolutely love to rewrite it again and get it professionally edited and professionally published, I really feel that for me, it was so much more important to have something there for folks than for me to spend 7 years
perfecting
trying to write a book and making it the best we can. Because there's just nothing out there for fat people. Like all of the fertility and pregnancy books out there, they have maybe a paragraph or two about how you need to be a quote unquote healthy weight. And then they'll just talk about restriction and around food and around diet and around all of these things that you should do. And it's just not helpful. So I really just wanted there to be something that somebody in a bigger body who maybe was feeling the way that I was feeling would be able to read and just feel more understood and heard and validated in what they were going through. I like to describe it as a bit of a hug in a book. So that feels so nice. We're having a conversation and I'm there to cheer you on. So yeah, it's not it's not the same as like a polished professional edited book, but there is still a lot of value and a lot of love and a lot of comfort in it, which is why I still promote it and love it and share it. And it's just me. It's imperfect. It's loving. It's kind, and it's hopefully something that people will get a lot of benefit from reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And throughout this whole conversation, I'm just thinking, while you specialize in working with folks in bigger bodies, like anti-fat bias impacts every person who's trying to get pregnant or is pregnant. And there's benefit to people of all sizes. I think in some of these concepts of what you're talking about, even though there are unique and special needs that folks in bigger bodies have, and that's not to downplay those. I just think what you're talking about with the empowerment and the agency and like the compassion, like that is something that everybody who's in this journey of fertility and pregnancy would benefit from.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree that I think it's a universal experience for folks who are assigned female at birth that we put pressure on ourselves around our bodies and told that we need to be smaller, no matter what our size of our body is, that we're told that it's not good enough, that it needs to be smaller, that it's somehow our fault, that we are the problem. And I think that experience is definitely universal when it comes to the fertility space.
Yeah. Yeah. What does it mean for you, Nicola, to take up space in your own life right now?
So at the moment, I am really embracing different ways of testing my body and see what it's capable of. So
okay.
At the moment, I'm doing cold water swimming, which is really fun, although there's not that much cold water around at the moment because it's June. But also I do something called Morris dancing, which is like traditional English dancing, which is
That's amazing. Like how traditional, like what era was it originating from?
It's not like Bridgerton vibes, but it's
okay.
I don't know if you have like images of what Morris is. So it's we have hankies that we wave and we have sticks that we bash and we wear bells.
Oh, amazing. I don't know about this. So this is all new.
Picture or a video.
Yeah, please.
But it's, I'd say maybe 100+ years old and like very folk. It's very like country English. It's very quirky. Lots of jumping and it's hilarious. And very cardio heavy, but really good fun. And I really love it. And then something that I'm starting soon is I'm going to be running with my dog. So it's something called Canicross, which is like a sport where you like huck the dog onto the front and he's running and I'm going to be running and I'm just playing. I'm playing with what my body is capable of. I'm just finding things that bring me joy. And if it doesn't, I'm also giving my space the grace to let it go and just be like, yeah, that's not for me. And that's cool too. So it's just finding that play and that joy in what my body is capable of. And I'm finding a lot of fun in that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I haven't heard of either of those things. And now I'm going to, send me a picture and I'm going to look at it.
I will.
What did you call it? Canicrossing?
Canicross. Yeah.
Canicross. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's like cross-country running, but with your dog.
With your dog.
I'm hopeful that he'll pull me along quite a lot, but he is a bit of a nutter.
Oh, incredible. Oh, this has been so much fun, Nicola. I'd love for other people to find you and connect with your work. How would you recommend that they do that and some of the offerings that you have?
So I'm most available on Instagram and my handle is at Fat Positive Fertility. So you can get my book on Amazon, any kind of the Amazon store. It's just Fat and Fertile. And then if you head over to my website, which is nicolasalmon.co.uk, I have all kinds of different programs of like different costs depending on what your needs are. So I have one specifically about IVF and navigating that in a bigger body. I have one if you're at the very start of your journey and you just need to really figure out how to give yourself permission to even get started, which so many of the folks that I work with struggle with. One-to-one coaching, group coaching, all different ways that I work with folks. So if you're interested in learning more, then so happy to have a chat and just see how I can help.
Thank you so much for all the work that you do. Thank you for being here and sharing your beautiful light with the world. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a joy.
And everyone listening, thanks for being here too. And I hope you all find some ways to take up a little more space this week.
Thank you for listening to Taking Up Space. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it to be a resource for you in your own embodiment, healing, and body liberation journey. I hope you can continue the conversation with me over on social media by sharing your thoughts, offering your ideas and suggestions for future episodes, or just connecting. You can find me on Instagram at Inner Atlas Therapy. If you liked this episode and want to support the show,
please subscribe, rate, and review the show in your preferred podcast platform. And share this episode with a friend. This ensures that more people can find the pod and will amplify our message of body liberation for all. If you haven't checked it out yet, I have a free Taking Up Space workbook available. This workbook will have you engage in self-reflection and embodied practices as you navigate your own journey of taking up space. You can find this free resource on my website, inneratlastherapy.com. I'll also link in the show notes some additional resources I've developed in my online shop to help you deepen into your own embodiment, healing, and body liberation work. Thanks again for being here. And until next time, I hope you join me in the resistance and find some ways to take up space this week. I'll see you next time.